comes after? You have to just like, you talk about sort of heading down a road of fascism, right? Like, you know, who knows? Different people have different definitions. But who knows how far down a road you go until you are called fascist, right? Because it's very easy to look in retrospect and say, this regime was fascistic, this regime was pure fascism, this had elements of it. The thing about the Trump administration has been that it may not have crossed that threshold. I don't know where that is. I don't want to litigate it at this moment. But there are certain paths you have to take to get to that point where history looks back on this era and say this is fascism. And it inevitably, the way that these fascistic governments, regimes, whatever it is, operate, is they start at the weakest people. Weakest in terms of political power, weakest in terms of their most marginal, perhaps. They have the least amount of support materially and politically in society. So, you know, immigrant children, they're not even citizens. They don't have the same rights that other children have. Immigrant parents. Then maybe you move to like, all right, folks who have been here for a while. They didn't come here on their own, but we're still going to sort of terrorize them. Then maybe people who are literally like their lives depend on their being here. 1,000 people with like sort of getting life-saving medicine in this country that you would boot out. Maybe you also target transgender folks like this administration has done. Harder for them to do it with gay people, broadly speaking, but maybe you can attack things like marriage equality. And each time you do it, you know, at one point it was the Muslim ban, but just Muslims who are, you know, terrorists. And then maybe it's like, oh, we're not going to let in any of the people from the Bahamas, despite what went on there under a temporary protected status. In fact, we're getting rid of a lot of the people who are here under a temporary protected status. And you basically, it's not perfect, but you basically just step up the rung of people. And each time you're able to do something to people down on the totem pole in terms of resources, materially or political, and then you take a step up and you widen your net a little bit and you widen the group of people. I mean, this is the way that fascistic regimes work. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you're killing all of them. It could just mean that you're deporting them. You're putting them on trains and sending them to Poland or wherever. Or you're just denying them entry into places, or you're starting to limit their rights that they have. And Donald Trump is taking the next step. We're not talking about immigrants. We're talking about people who are U.S. citizens, ostensibly have a wide swath of rights. And here's Donald Trump saying that despite the fact that you remember that his party is very, very adamant about states' rights, right? Which is not even code. It is literally, you cannot come in here and tell us how to treat our slaves or our freed black people, or then it just expands. But that's basically the history of that formulation. Here's Donald Trump just, I think, yesterday at the making a statement.
You know what's happening? It's like, look at what's happening. San Francisco. Take a look at what's going on. And we're going to have to step in and do something about it, because we can't allow that to happen to our great cities. Los Angeles is a great city. We can't allow it. And in the not too distant future, you're going to see, we're going to step in. We're not going to allow it to happen where major companies are leaving their cities. They're leaving our country when they see that. You walk in, they pay a lot of rent. They walk into a beautiful building, the best street in California, and you have a sight that nobody even can believe. Nobody can believe, and we're going to have to do something about it. And we will do something about it. We're going to give them notice. In fact, we gave them a notice today. Clean it up. You got to do something. You can't have it. These are our great American cities, and they're an embarrassment, what the Democrats have let happen. Republicans want to rebuild our inner cities.
What he's talking about is sweeping the streets clean of homeless people. And the proposal that they're floating now is using some former air terminal as like, basically, I'm trying to think of how you would call this, a way of concentrating them in an area, a small area, call it some type of like campus or like a camp of some sorts. And they want to concentrate them there so that they're not on the streets. Just coincidentally, I am sure, according to Media Matters, Fox News began increasing its coverage of homelessness in America, maybe because they became very concerned with that issue. They were using it as a bludgeon, suggesting that it's because of Democratic policies that homelessness exists. I mean, it's really what they're saying is Democrats tolerate homeless people. And that's the problem. The problem isn't that we have a lack of policies to address the problem of homelessness. It's that Democrats don't punish homeless people enough, and that's why they congregate in areas where they don't get punished. Media Matters showed that the network aired 53 segments since May on Fox News about homelessness. And so this is obviously like the brain trust at Fox has been test marketing this stuff. And they're rolling it out and they're suggesting it to Trump. And that's what's going on here. And here's Ben Shapiro.
This was in May, but I've noticed him and like Rubin mentioning it on their shows more often lately.
Yes, there's no doubt in my mind that they're all getting the message, whether it's formalized or something, or they're talking about it. This is back in May. Newsom called the growing homelessness in California a national disgrace. He's announced he's launching a task force to find solutions, and he's working on it because it obviously requires money and housing support. I mean, these are pretty basic things. The problem is that there's very little of that. You also need support for mental health. A lot of these people who are on the streets have mental, emotional issues. Maybe they have addiction issues. In some instances, that's causal. In some instances, it's a function of where they are and they can't get out of their situation. Domestic abuse plays a part in this. The immigration policies that we have undoubtedly do, because they scare a lot of people and they're afraid to go to the authorities for help.
Yeah, and you want to talk about the big companies that are supposedly going to leave these cities because of the homeless problem. They're causing the homeless problem with gentrification.
In many respects, that is a big part of the problem. So rounding them up, putting them in some type of camps, not a solution. But here is the states' rights guy basically threatening California because they want to make this a political issue. And that's basically what it's come down to. So